Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking an inner journey, looking at your digestive system. We've got some interesting excerpts to guide us.
Yeah, and our mission really is to pull out the most, well, mind-blowing bits of how your body turns food into fuel. Some surprisingly clever engineering in there.
Exactly. We're going from that first bite all the way through, looking at the key players and, their methods.
Okay, so where do we begin? The mouth?
Yep, the oral cavity. It's not just about taste. It's really the first processing station. You've got your tongue, obviously, but also those salivary glands, three pairs.
Right. And what's cool is that saliva isn't just, well, wetness. It's produced by the parotid, submandibular, and sublingual glands. And it actually has enzymes in it.
Enzymes that start breaking down carbs right away.
Exactly. Before you even swallow. Like getting a head start on that piece of toast.
And your teeth. Dentition, you get two sets right. Incisors for cutting, canines for tearing.
Your built-in toolkit.
Yeah. And then premolars and molars, they do the grinding. A single molar is pretty complex structurally for that crushing job.
Absolutely. That physical breakdown, the chewing, it's crucial. It massively increases the food's surface area.
It makes it easier for the enzymes later on.
Precisely. Gives them much more to work with.
Okay, so after chewing, there's this sort of hidden support system, serous membranes.
Think of it like, well, like cling film. You have the visceral layer right on the organs and the parietal layer lining the cavity wall.
And between them, mesenteries.
Yeah, these amazing tissue sheets. They do more than just hold things in place. They're like conduits. Nerves, blood vessels, lymphatics, all the supply lines run through them.
Okay. And some organs are wrapped up tight, intraperitoneal. Others are sort of tucked behind, retroperitoneal.
Exactly. And you've got special ones, too, like the omentums and the mesocolon giving extra support.
Right. So that chewed food, the bolus, heads into the main tract. And this tract has like a standard structure, 4 layers.
That's right, 4 tunics. From the inside out, the mucosa touching the food, absorbing, secreting stuff.
Okay.
Then the submucosa, lots of vessels, nerves. Then the muscularis externa, the muscle layers doing the moving.
Ah, the muscles. That's where peristalsis and segmentation happen.
Yep. Peristalsis is that wave-like push, moving food along, think squeezing toothpaste.
Right. And segmentation.
More of a local mixing, a churning. Ensures everything gets blended with digestive juices. Not so much forward movement, more mixing.
Got it. And as food travels, different parts specialize. Pharynx, esophagus, mostly just transport tubes.
Pretty much, yeah. But then the stomach, wow, that's where the serious chemical action ramps up.
Gastric pits, with glands making hydrochloric acid. That sounds intense.
It is intense, super acidic. It breaks down proteins, but also kills off loads of bacteria. Sterilizes your food, essentially. Plus, it makes pepsinogen.
Which becomes pepsin, the protein enzyme.
Correct. And mucus, crucially, to protect the stomach wall from that acid.
Amazing it doesn't digest itself.
It really is.
Yeah.
Then, onto the small intestine, the real workhorse.
3 sections: duodenum, jejunum, ileum.
That's it. Duodenum is mixing bowl central, gets secretions from the pancreas and liver. Jejunum is the absorption champion. Ileum mops up the rest, like vitamin B12.
And the surface area thing here is incredible, isn't it? Folds.
Plicae circularis, yeah, big folds.
Then villi on the folds.
Like little fingers.
And microvilli on the villi.
Even tinier projections. It's all about creating this massive area for absorption, like going from a flat sheet to, I don't know, a huge shag carpet.
Wow. And lacteals in there for fats.
Yep, lymphatic vessels specialized for fat absorption.
Okay. After all that, the large intestine. Wider, shorter. What's its main job?
Mostly water absorption, getting electrolytes back, and it's home to trillions of gut bacteria, kind of the recycling and waste processing center.
So less nutrient absorption, more water recovery.
Primarily, yes, solidifying things.
And we can't forget the accessory organs, liver, gallbladder, pancreas. Food doesn't go through them, but they're vital.
Absolutely essential. The liver makes bile-like detergent for fats. Gallbladder stores it. Pancreas makes a potent enzyme cocktail for carbs, proteins, and fats. They dump their goods into the small intestine.
Okay, quick recap on the big molecules. Carbs start breaking down where?
In the mouth. Salivary amylase.
Proteins.
Stomach. Pepsin kicks it off.
And fats.
Really get going in the small intestine thanks to bile and pancreatic lipase.
So it's this incredibly coordinated dance, isn't it? Mechanical smashing, chemical dissolving, absorption.
It's a beautiful system. A real symphony of processes working together.
Truly a marvel, each part playing its specific, vital role. So here's a final thought. That surface area in your small intestine may be the size of a tennis court, all folded up inside you, Just incredible. Makes you wonder what other systems in our bodies have that kind of hidden, surprising complexity beneath a seemingly simple surface.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into how our bodies actually move. We're exploring the amazing world of human joints.
That's right. We're using Anatomy of Human Joints as our guide. It's a fascinating area.
And our goal is pretty straightforward. We want to give you a really clear, engaging picture of how these connections are built and, how they let us do everything we do.
From walking to waving, yeah. It's all about these structures.
So joints aren't all the same, are they? How do we even start categorizing them?
Well, there are a couple of main ways. We can look at what physically connects the bones. Is it tough fibers, cartilage, or is there a fluid space?
Okay, the structural approach.
Exactly. And we can also classify them by how much they move. Some are totally fixed, some allow a little bit of give, and others are, freely movable.
Right. So structurally, fibrous, cartilaginous, and synovial. Those are the three.
You got it. Fibrous are really dense, think stitches. Cartilaginous use cartilage, a bit more flexible.
Yeah.
And synovial joints have that joint cavity filled with fluid, very mobile.
And the movement categories. Synarthrosis.
Antiarthrosis.
And diarthrosis. Yeah. Synarthrosis means immovable, like skull sutures, which are fibrous and synarthrotic.
Ah, okay. So the categories overlap.
They do. Amphiarthrosis means slightly movable, like the connection between your lower leg bones, the tibia and fibula down near the ankle. That's fibrous but allows a little movement. Or the pubic symphysis, that's cartilage, allowing slight movement.
And diarthrosis is freely movable. Those must be the synovial joints then.
Mostly, yes. All synovial joints are diarthroses. They're built for movement. Think shoulders, hips, knees, elbows.
So let's zoom in on those synovial joints. What makes them so good at moving?
And they have a few key features. First, the bone ends are covered in super smooth articular cartilage. Reduces friction.
Like a polished surface.
Exactly. Then there's the joint cavity itself, a space filled with synovial fluid. It's like oil in an engine, lubricates everything.
And it's all held together.
By an articular capsule, it has two layers. A tough outer fibrous layer for strength and stability.
Right. And an inner synovial membrane. That membrane is actually what produces the synovial fluid. Pretty neat system.
Wow, okay. And sometimes there are extra bits. I think the source mentioned bursa and tendon sheaths.
Ah, yes. Essential friction reducers. A bursa is like a tiny fluid-filled cushion. They sit between, say, a bone and a tendon or skin, preventing rubbing.
So they pop up where things might rub together.
Precisely. And tendon sheaths are similar but elongated. They wrap completely around a tendon like a sleeve. You find them where tendons run through tight spaces, like in your wrist or ankle. Helps them glide smoothly.
Makes sense. Okay, so with these smooth, lubricated joints, we get movement. What about the different types of movement, planes of movement?
Right. Think directions. Gliding is simple, one flat surface sliding over another, like the small bones in your wrist or ankle.
Okay, just back and forth or side to side.
Sort of, yeah. Then you have hinge joints, like your elbow or knee. They move mainly in one plane, like a door hinge bending and straightening, flexion and extension.
And pivot joints.
Those allow rotation around an axis. Think about turning your head side to side or rotating your forearm to turn your palm up or down. That's a pivot joint at work between the radius and ulna.
Then it gets a bit more complex. Ellipsoidal? Saddle?
Yeah, ellipsoidal or condylar joints allow movement in two planes, back and forth, side to side, and you can combine them for circumduction, like moving your wrist in a circle.
And saddle joints, like the thumb.
Exactly. The thumb's carpometacarpal joint is the classic example. It allows those two planes of movement, plus that special opposition touching your thumb to your fingertips. Really crucial for grasping.
And the champions of movement, ball and socket.
Absolutely. Your shoulder and hip. They allow movement in multiple planes, forward, backward, sideways, rotation, circumduction, the most freely movable type.
So that covers the joint types based on movement shape. What about the actual actions?
Yeah.
Flexion, extension.
Right. Flexion is bending, decreasing the angle. Extension is straightening, increasing the angle. Hyperextension is going beyond the normal straight position.
And moving limbs away or towards the body.
That's abduction, moving away from the midline, and adduction, moving towards the midline. Think adding it back to the body.
We also mentioned rotation.
Yep. Turning a bone around its own long axis, like rotating your whole arm inwards or outwards. And circumduction is that cone-like movement, combining flexion, extension, abduction, and adduction.
Okay. And there's some special ones too, right? Like for the feet and hands.
Dorsiflexion is pointing your toes up. Plantar flexion is pointing them down. Inversion turns the sole of your foot inwards. Eversion turns it outwards.
And pronation and supination for the forearm?
That's the rotation we mentioned. Pronation is palm down, supination is palm up, like holding a bowl of soup.
Hmm,
Plus, things like shrugging your shoulders up, elevation, or dropping them down, depression.
quite a vocabulary.
It describes an incredible range of actions, all thanks to these joint designs.
The source specifically mentioned the knee, elbow, shoulder, and hip. They're all synovial, but clearly different.
Very different in function, despite the shared basic structure. The knee is mostly a hinge, built for stable weight bearing, but allowing some rotation. The elbow is also mainly a hinge, but works with the pivot joint for forearm rotation.
And the shoulder versus the hip, both ball and socket.
But trade-offs. The shoulder has a shallower socket, giving it amazing range of motion but less stability. The hip socket is deep, providing incredible stability for supporting body weight, but sacrificing some range compared to the shoulder.
Fascinating balance between mobility and stability. Finally, let's briefly touch on arthritis. It affects so many people.
Yeah, it's really a group of conditions causing joint inflammation or degeneration. The most common is osteoarthritis, basically wear and tear on the articular cartilage over time,
It breaks down.
pretty much. Then there's rheumatoid arthritis, which is different. It's autoimmune. The body's own immune system attacks the joint linings, especially the synovial membrane.
Ouch. And gout.
Gouty arthritis involves uric acid crystals building up in the joint fluid. They're like tiny needles causing intense inflammation and pain.
So wrapping this up, the structure of each joint, from the fibrous ones holding our skull together to the incredibly complex synovial joints, dictates its movement potential.
Absolutely. The type of connection, the shape of the bones, the ligaments, the fluid, it all works together to allow this huge spectrum of motion or restrict it where needed.
Understanding this gives you real insight into how we function and also what goes wrong in conditions like arthritis.
Which leads to something interesting for you, the listener, to think about. We've seen this intricate design just in how bones connect. Where else in our biology might we find similar levels of surprising complexity hidden in plain sight? And what could digging deeper into those systems mean for our health down the road? We all know that feeling when our body's defenses are, kicking in. But what about the system working constantly behind the scenes? Today, we're doing a deep dive into the lymphatic system based on a really insightful chapter we've been looking at. And our goal isn't just the usual "it fights infections" line. We want to explore its other, maybe surprising, crucial roles for just everyday health.
Absolutely. It's funny, the circulatory system gets all the attention, right?
Yeah.
But the lymphatic system, it's processing almost 3 liters of fluid every day.
3 liters. Wow.
Yeah, that's nearly your whole blood plasma volume. It really shows how vital it is for just, well, keeping everything in balance.
Okay, so let's break the system down. What are the main parts we're talking about, and what are their big jobs?
Right. So think of it like the body's combined drainage and security system. You've got the lymph itself, that's the fluid, kind of like blood plasma.
Okay.
Then the lymph vessels, which are like the pipes, lymph nodes, the filter stations, and then the lymphoid organs like your spleen, thymus, and tonsils.
And the function.
Main things are managing fluid balance, helping absorb fats from your food. We won't go deep into that today. And of course, the big one, immune defense.
Let's talk about that fluid balance. How does this whole drainage thing actually work?
Okay, so as blood flows around, a little bit of fluid naturally leaks out from the capillaries into your body tissues. That's called interstitial fluid.
Right, the stuff between the cells.
Exactly. And the lymphatic system's job is to basically collect this excess fluid. Tiny lymphatic capillaries just sort of soak it up.
Ah, okay. And once it's inside those vessels,
Then it's called lymph. This lymph travels through the network of vessels, getting filtered along the way, and eventually it gets dumped back into your bloodstream,
dumped back where?
mostly up near your neck. There are 2 main collecting ducts, the right lymphatic duct for the upper right part of your body, and the thoracic duct for, well, pretty much everywhere else. They connect to large veins there.
Got it. So these vessels lead to the lymph nodes. We've all felt them swell up sometimes. Where are the main clusters, and what exactly happens inside?
Yeah, you usually notice them in your neck, armpits, or groin. Those are major collection points. Lymph flows into the node through what we call afferent vessels.
Afferent, arriving.
Precisely. A for arrive. Inside, the node acts like a filter or maybe a security checkpoint. It's packed with immune cells.
What kinds?
You've got lymphocytes, the T cells and B cells, plus macrophages, dendritic cells. Basically, the security team, scanning the lymph for any trouble like bacteria or viruses.
And then it flows out.
Right. Once it's been checked and cleaned, the lymph exits through efferent vessels, A for exit, and continues its journey.
Now, something that stood out in our reading was the connection between lymph nodes and cancer spread. Why do they get involved?
That's a really important point because the nodes are designed to trap foreign things. Stray cancer cells that break off from a tumor can get filtered out and trapped there too.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. And if they find the conditions right, they can unfortunately start to grow in the node, forming a secondary tumor, or what's called a metastasis. It's a common pathway for cancer to spread.
Okay, moving beyond the nodes, you mentioned lymphoid organs like the spleen, thymus, tonsils. Quick rundown on their roles.
Sure. The spleen, it mainly filters your blood, looking for old red blood cells and pathogens. And it's also a site where lymphocytes get activated.
And the thymus.
The thymus is really crucial for T cells. It's like their training ground, where they mature and learn what to attack and what to leave alone. It's in the chest, behind the sternum.
Tonsils, they seem kind of exposed.
They are. And that's the point. They're positioned right at the entrance of your throat and nose to catch pathogens trying to get in through breathing or eating. First line of defense.
You mentioned macrophages earlier, the cell eaters in the nodes. Are they the only phagocytic cells involved?
They're definitely key players, engulfing pathogens and debris. You also have neutrophils, which are another type of phagocyte, often first responders, especially in the bloodstream. And dendritic cells are really interesting too. They also engulf invaders, but then they present little pieces of the invader antigens to T cells. It's like showing the T cells who the enemy is, helping to kickstart a really specific immune response.
Right, let's focus on those T cells. Different types, you said. Where do they come from? What do they do?
Exactly. T lymphocytes, or T cells, they start in the bone marrow, like most blood cells, but mature in the thymus, that's the T.
Makes sense.
And there are a few main kinds. Helper T cells are like the coordinators, the managers. They activate other immune cells, including B cells and cytotoxic T cells.
Okay, so the cytotoxic ones.
They're the direct killers. They find cells in your body that are infected with viruses or have become cancerous, and they eliminate them.
And the third type?
Regulatory T cells. Their job is basically to put the brakes on to make sure the immune response doesn't go overboard and start attacking healthy tissue. They help maintain tolerance.
Fascinating. What about the B lymphocytes then? The antibody makers.
Correct. B cells also develop in the bone marrow. When activated, often with help from those helper T cells we mentioned, they differentiate.
Into what?
Two main types. Plasma cells, which are essentially antibody factories, churning out antibodies to neutralize specific threats. And memory B cells.
Memory cells for long-term immunity.
Exactly. They stick around for years, sometimes a lifetime, remembering a specific pathogen. If you encounter it again, they allow for a much faster and stronger response. That's the basis of vaccination, really.
No, I think our source mentioned one more lymphocyte type, kind of different from B and T cells.
Yeah, the natural killer cells, or NK cells. They're a bit different because they're part of the innate immune system, the rapid, non-specific defense.
How so?
Unlike T and B cells that need to be primed to recognize a specific antigen, NK cells can identify and kill certain infected cells or tumor cells right away without that prior sensitization. Think of them as like the immediate patrol guards.
Wow. So when you take a step back, this whole lymphatic system is this incredibly complex network, constantly managing fluid, constantly patrolling. It's a real hidden powerhouse.
It really is. It's dynamic, it's interconnected, and absolutely essential for keeping us healthy, maintaining our internal environment, and defending against, a world full of potential threats.
Which really makes you think, doesn't it? This system is doing constant surveillance, keeping this delicate balance. What happens when that goes wrong? What disrupts it? Maybe thinking about things like autoimmune diseases or issues with immunity. That could be a whole other fascinating area to explore. Thanks for this deep dive with us today.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're jumping right into something pretty incredible, the machinery that powers literally every move you make, your muscles.
Right. We've got some great material here covering everything from, the basic tissue structure to how contractions actually happen.
Exactly. And our mission really is to pull out the core understanding of how it all works. From the microscopic level up to your big movements.
Yeah, make it clear, make it engaging without getting totally lost in the weeds, because there's a lot there, from tissue layers to nerve signals, even how muscles get their names.
Okay, let's get into it then. So muscles aren't just for moving us around, right? They help with posture, stabilize joints, even generate heat.
Absolutely essential functions. And it all starts with how they're built. The organization is key.
Yeah, so think about a single muscle fiber. It's wrapped in this delicate layer, the endomysium.
Endomysium. That surrounds each individual cell or fiber.
Then you bundle a bunch of those fibers together, and that bundle, a fascicle, gets its own wrapper,
Hmm.
the perimysium.
Right. And then you take all those bundles, all the fascicles, and wrap the entire muscle in the epimysium.
So it's layers within layers. And these connective tissues, they all merge together at the ends, don't they?
They do. They form either those cord-like tendons or sometimes wider flat sheets called aponeuroses. That's what actually connects the muscle to the bone.
Gotcha. And that leads to origin and insertion, which can sometimes be a bit confusing.
Yeah, basically the origin is the attachment point on the bone that moves less during the contraction. The insertion is on the bone that moves more. Think about flexing your bicep. The shoulder scapula area is more the origin. The forearm bone is the insertion.
That makes sense. Okay, let's zoom in even further. Inside that single muscle fiber, what's going on there?
You find these long strands called myofibrils, and they're made up of repeating units, the real workhorses, the sarcomeres.
Ah, the sarcomere. That's the fundamental unit of contraction, right?
Precisely. And inside the sarcomere, you have the filaments. Thin ones made mainly of actin and thicker ones made of myosin. Their arrangement is very specific.
That overlapping pattern is crucial, I gather. But how does it actually get the message to contract?
Good question. It needs a signal from the nervous system that comes via a motor unit.
Which is,
It's one nerve cell, a motor neuron, and all the muscle fibers it controls. Could be just a few fibers for fine control or hundreds for powerful movements.
okay, so the nerve talks to the muscle. Where does that happen?
At a specialized spot called the neuromuscular junction, it's where the end of the nerve fiber gets really close to the muscle fiber's membrane, the sarcolemma.
And it releases a chemical.
Yeah, acetylcholine. It jumps across that tiny gap, binds to receptors on the sarcolemma, and boom, it triggers an electrical signal, an action potential.
Okay, so an electrical wave spreads across the muscle fiber. Then what?
That wave dives deep into the cell and tells the sarcoplasmic reticulum, which is kind of like the muscle cell's specialized calcium storage tank, to release calcium ions.
Calcium. Right, that's the trigger, isn't it?
Yeah.
For the actual contraction.
Exactly. This is where the sliding filament theory comes in. The calcium essentially unlocks the actin filaments, allowing the myosin heads, the thick filaments, to latch on.
Like little hooks grabbing on.
Sort of, yeah. And then, using energy from ATP, the myosin heads pull the actin filaments inwards towards the center of the sarcomere. They slide past each other.
So the whole sarcomere unit shortens because the filaments overlap more.
Precisely. And since this happens in sarcomeres all along the myofibril and in all the myofibrils in the fiber, the entire muscle cell contracts.
Wow. And relaxation is just the reverse. Signal stops.
Signal stops, acetylcholine is cleared away, calcium gets pumped back into storage, the myosin lets go of the actin, and the filaments slide back. Muscle relaxes.
It's an incredible little engine.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned different fibers earlier, fast and slow.
Right. Fast twitch fibers contract quickly and powerfully, great for sprinting or lifting heavy, but they fatigue faster. Slow twitch fibers are more endurance-oriented, like for posture or long-distance running. Most muscles have a mix.
And muscles work in chemes, too. Agonist, antagonist.
Yeah. The agonist is the prime mover, the one mainly responsible for the action, like your biceps when curling a weight.
And the antagonist opposes that action.
Exactly. It has to relax or control the movement. So the triceps on the back of your arm would be the antagonist during that bicep curl. Synergists are muscles that help the agonist, maybe by stabilizing the joint or adding a bit of force.
Okay, that clarifies the roles.
Yeah.
What about how muscles get their names? Seems like there are patterns.
Oh, definitely. Names often give clues. Location, like tibialis anterior is on the front of the tibia. Shape, like the deltoid is triangular, like the Greek letter delta.
Function, too, right? Like flexor or extensor.
Absolutely. Flexor carpi ulnaris tells you it flexes the wrist, carpi, and is on the ulna side. Sometimes size, maximus or minimus, or the number of origins, like biceps meaning 2 heads, triceps meaning 3.
So the name is like a little description. And even the way the fibers within the muscle are arranged matters. Fascicle arrangement.
Big time. Parallel fibers, like in the biceps, allow for a big range of motion. Pinnate fibers, which attach obliquely to a central tendon, like feathers on a quill, pack more fibers into a smaller space, generating more force, but maybe less range of motion.
Interesting trade-off. Finally, the sources mentioned levers and pulleys in the body.
Yeah, our bones and joints act as lever systems. There are 3 classes. First class, like a seesaw, fulcrum in the middle, think nodding your head.
Okay.
Second class, like a wheelbarrow, resistance in the middle, like standing on tiptoes. The ball of your foot is the fulcrum, your body weight, the resistance.
Gotcha.
And third class is most common. Effort, is in the middle, like that bicep curl again. Elbow is the fulcrum, the weight in your hand is the resistance, and the biceps muscle provides the effort in between.
So our bodies use basic physics principles and anatomical pulleys.
Like your kneecap, the patella. It changes the direction of the quadriceps tendon's pull, giving it a better angle to extend the knee more effectively. Improves leverage.
It all ties together: structure, signals, mechanics. So what's the big takeaway here?
I think it's just the sheer elegance and integration. From these tiny molecular interactions of actin and myosin, triggered by a nerve impulse, scaled up through organized tissues and lever systems to produce every single movement you make, it's remarkably efficient.
Truly is. So, your muscles are this incredible piece of biological engineering. Complex signals, molecular motors, mechanical advantage, all working seamlessly.
Yeah.
So here's something to think about. That simple act of just, say, lifting your finger. It involves this whole cascade, as we've talked about: electrical signals, calcium release, filament sliding, lever action. What other seemingly simple things your body does might hide just as much fascinating complexity underneath? That's your food for thought from this deep dive. Until next time.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a closer look at something we do constantly: breathing. We're exploring your respiratory system.
Yeah, we've gathered some great material to really unpack how this whole process works. How you breathe in, breathe out, and, well, everything that happens in between.
Exactly. We'll be looking at what the system actually does, the journey air takes when you inhale.
And how we produce sound, too. Plus the mechanics behind it all, how the muscles make it happen.
Right. Our mission today is pretty straightforward. Give you the essential knowledge in a way that's clear and hopefully really interesting.
So let's get started. Where better to begin than the upper respiratory tract, the very start of the journey?
Okay, so air comes in, but it's not just a simple pipe, is it?
Not at all. It's doing a lot right away.
Yeah.
Filtering the air, warming it up, adding moisture, basically conditioning it before it goes deeper.
Ah, like an internal air conditioner. What parts are we talking about here?
Well, you've got the nasal cavity, obviously, then the pharynx, which is itself divided into the nasopharynx, oropharynx, and laryngopharynx.
That crossroads bit.
Exactly. And then finally the larynx, or voice box.
So how does that conditioning actually happen, the warming and filtering?
Okay, so inside your nasal cavity, there are lots of tiny blood vessels really close to the surface. They radiate heat to warm the incoming air.
Makes sense. And the moisture?
That comes from the mucus lining. It humidifies the air. And that mucus, along with tiny hairs called cilia, traps dust, pollen, other particles.
A filter system.
A very effective one. The cilia constantly beat upwards, moving that trapped debris towards your throat so you can swallow it or cough it out, like a tiny escalator for dust.
Wow. And you mentioned the pharynx sections have different linings. Why is that?
Right. So the nasopharynx, which mostly just sees air pass through, has that same ciliated epithelium, the sweeping kind.
Okay.
But the oropharynx and laryngopharynx,
Yeah.
they have to handle food and drink as well as air, so they need something tougher.
Like what?
Stratified squamous epithelium. It's more like layers of flat cells, much more resistant to abrasion from food passing by. Function dictates form, really.
Fascinating. Before we move down, what about those sinuses, the paranasal ones?
Yes, the frontal, ethmoid, sphenoid, and maxillary sinuses, those air-filled pockets in the skull bones.
What do they actually do besides cause trouble sometimes?
Well, they lighten the skull a bit. They help warm and moisten the air too, and they also act as resonating chambers for your voice.
Okay, interesting. So next stop, the larynx, the voice box.
That's it. The structure is mostly cartilage.
Yeah.
The thyroid cartilage forms the Adam's apple.
Right.
The cricoid cartilage below it, the epiglottis, which acts like a lid during swallowing, and smaller ones like the arytenoids. But its key function, apart from being an airway, is sound production.
How does that work? It seems incredible.
It really is. You have vocal folds, sometimes called vocal cords, stretched across the larynx. When you exhale and decide to speak, air passes between them, causing them to vibrate.
Like reeds in an instrument.
Exactly like that. The vibration creates sound waves.
And how do we control pitch and loudness?
Pitch is controlled by the tension and length of the vocal folds. Tighter and shorter means higher pitch. Loudness is determined by the pressure of the air forced across them. More air pressure, louder sound.
Simple mechanics, but with such complex results. Okay, so air passes the larynx and enters the trachea.
The trachea, or windpipe, yes.
Huh?
It's a sturdy tube about 4 or 5 inches long.
And it has those rings.
C-shaped rings of cartilage, yeah. They're on the front and sides to keep the airway permanently open. Patent is the term.
Why C-shaped? Why not full rings?
Good question. The back part, against the esophagus, doesn't have cartilage. It has smooth muscle, the trachealis muscle. This allows the esophagus to expand a bit when you swallow larger bits of food. It offers flexibility.
Clever design. And from the trachea.
It branches. Like an upside-down tree, the trachea divides into two main bronchi, one for each lung.
Okay.
Then those main bronchi divide into smaller lobar bronchi, then segmental bronchi, and they keep branching into smaller and smaller tubes called bronchioles.
Getting really tiny now.
Very tiny. Eventually, you reach the terminal bronchioles, then respiratory bronchioles, which lead into alveolar ducts, then a clusters called alveolar sacs, made up of individual alveoli.
And that's where the gas exchange happens.
Right.
In the alveoli.
Precisely. These millions of tiny, thin-walled air sacs are the functional units. This is where oxygen from the air you breathed in diffuses into your bloodstream, and carbon dioxide from your blood diffuses out to be exhaled.
And that ciliated lining we talked about earlier, does it go all the way down?
No, it starts around the level of the bronchioles. The smallest airways need to be clear for efficient gas exchange, without mucus or cilia getting in the way.
Makes sense. Are the alveolar cells themselves special?
Oh, absolutely. There are three main types. Type I pneumocytes are the main ones forming the wall. They're incredibly thin, like paper thin, maximizing diffusion speed.
Okay.
Then you have type 2 pneumocytes scattered among them. These secrete something called surfactant.
Surfactant.
Yeah, it's like a detergent. It reduces the surface tension of the fluid lining the alveoli, which is crucial. Without it, the tiny sacs would collapse on exhalation due to water tension.
Wow, vital stuff. And the third type?
Alveolar macrophages, sometimes called dust cells. They're immune cells, basically the cleanup crew wandering around engulfing any dust particles or microbes that made it down that far.
Amazing little ecosystem. Now, the lungs themselves, they aren't identical, are they?
No, they're not. The right lung is a bit larger and has 3 lobes, superior, middle, and inferior. The left lung only has 2 lobes, superior and inferior.
Why the difference?
To make room for the heart. The heart tilts slightly to the left, so the left lung has an indentation called the cardiac notch to accommodate it.
Right, and they're covered in something, a membrane.
2 membranes, actually. The pleurae. The visceral pleura sticks directly to the lung surface. The parietal pleura lines the inside of the chest wall and diaphragm.
Is there space between them?
A potential space, yes, called the pleural cavity. It contains a very thin layer of pleural fluid. This fluid acts as a lubricant, allowing the lungs to glide smoothly against the chest wall as you breathe. It also helps keep the lungs stuck to the chest wall due to surface tension.
Okay, so let's put it all together. The actual mechanics. How do we inhale?
Inspiration, or inhaling, is an active process. It involves muscle contraction. Your main breathing muscle, the diaphragm, that big dome-shaped muscle under your lungs, contracts and flattens downwards.
Okay.
At the same time, your external intercostal muscles, the ones between your ribs, contract, pulling your rib cage upwards and outwards.
So the chest expands.
Exactly. Both actions increase the volume inside your thoracic cavity, your chest. Because the lungs are stuck to the chest wall via the pleura, they expand too.
And that pulls air in.
Right. Increasing the volume decreases the pressure inside the lungs compared to the air outside. Air naturally flows from higher pressure to lower pressure, so it rushes into your lungs.
Got it. And exhaling, is that active too?
Usually, quiet exhalation or expiration is passive. It doesn't require muscle contraction. The diaphragm and external intercostals just relax.
So the chest shrinks back.
Yes. Elastic recoil causes the chest wall and lungs to return to their smaller resting size. This decreases the thoracic volume, which increases the pressure inside the lungs above atmospheric pressure.
Pushing the air back out.
Precisely. It's largely driven by relaxation and elasticity. Of course, you can exhale forcefully using abdominal and internal intercostal muscles, but normal, quiet breathing out is passive.
It's such an elegant system when you break it down, from the air conditioning up top to the branching airways, the tiny alveoli doing the exchange, and these pressure changes driving it all.
It truly is. Every part is intricately designed and essential for that constant life-sustaining process. Filtering, warming, gas exchange, defense. It's all happening with every breath.
We've covered a lot: the path air takes, how sound is made, the crucial gas exchange, the mechanics. It really makes you appreciate the complexity.
Definitely. And it makes you think, doesn't it? How many other incredibly complex systems are working away inside us? Just as vital, just as intricate, often completely unnoticed.
That's a great thought to leave things on. What other microscopic worlds within us are just waiting to be explored? Something to ponder until our next deep dive. Thanks for joining us.